Yeah, I did change, and I'm really glad I changed.
This one's wife. An encounter with this one's wife. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. People's experiences with narcissists often vary because of what is presented to them. For instance, you may deal with a lesser narcissist and find yourself on the receiving end of a bombastic tirade of heated, ignited fury, possibly even being physically assaulted. In other instances, you might deal with a lesser who comes across as all right, because whilst they don't use a facade, the heated, ignited fury hasn't manifested on that occasion, and you're treated to a reasonable interaction. With the greater, you'll be subjected to charm, finding yourself made to feel like you are the centre of the world, the only person in the room, drawn in by their dizzying magnetism. In other instances, you might find yourself ignored, unsure as to why you received a brief but glowering look from them before the narcissist had nothing more to do with you. With certain of the mid-range narcissists, some people's experiences, they're a lovely person, ever so kind, ever so thoughtful, whilst others will say they're two-faced. They're a gossip, they're nasty, they're a backstabber, they engage in office politics. This is because, naturally, the narcissist not only behaves like a chameleon, showing different faces to different people, but the narcissist's behavior is affected by how their narcissism operates in any given moment. For some narcissists, they will utilize a veneer when dealing with you one-on-one, or where dealing with more people in a public-facing situation, a facade. Sometimes that facade fractures, or, as you might more commonly understand it to mean, the mask slips. This is why you will get some people who talk about this one's wife in favourable terms, because whenever they've interacted with her, they've only ever found her to be interesting, kind, supposedly empathic, thoughtful, and considerate. That's not because she is genuinely any of those things, it's because in that moment her narcissism manufactured that appearance in order to control that individual and to draw fuel from them. This means that that individual's experience of this one's wife was a positive one and causes them to believe that she is a pleasant and kind person. Those that maintain such a view tend to be individuals that have had limited interaction with her, whereby they have had limited opportunity to threaten her need for control, resulting in the facade slipping, or even where the heated ignited fury or cold ignited fury breaks through. Those naturally who've worked with her found themselves on the receiving end of bullying behaviour. This is because there was no need for a facade to be in place. It was taking place behind closed doors, and where they had inadvertently threatened her control, her narcissism selected a malign manipulation, for instance, insult, talking down to them, giving them a withering stare, making a grown man cry, as a means of bringing them back under control. Certain people are never exposed to that with this one's wife, hence they go around telling the world, oh, she's not like how she's portrayed. She's wonderful. She's lovely. Others, who have spent more time with her, get to see more of the actual this one's wife by virtue of either cracks in the facade, which is something that has been caused by her overexposure, or simply because behind closed doors the facade doesn't operate, and anybody who's spent a reasonable amount of time with the narcissist will tell you eventually you fall foul of the nastiness of the narcissist, because the narcissist simply cannot help being that way, because that's how the narcissist deals with a threat to control. With this one's wife, therefore, you have differing views about her, and naturally, it's also the case that she has sought to cultivate a particular image of how she is perceived, because she sees herself as kind and wonderful and thoughtful, and therefore expects all of you to see her in a similar fashion. We have had contrasting tales based upon people's experience of her, and I thought I would share with you a piece of information that just recently came my way as a consequence of me bumping into somebody who I had not seen for quite some time, who is, I would say, a loose friend of mine, a non-intimate secondary source whereby he and I just happened to find ourselves in a particular place where we had a chance to catch up. And in the course of the discussion, my friend provided me with an interesting piece of information about an encounter that he had had with this one's wife. My friend is an interior home designer to the uber rich. I've known him for a number of years, but our paths rarely cross as a consequence of being in different countries much of the time. We met as a consequence of an interaction with a mutual friend. I can say no more than that. And I learned that these days he has been working exclusively in Aspen, in Colorado, but also in Monty Shit Show. Naturally, this piqued my interest. I wasn't immediately going to ask about this one's wife, but I wondered whether he had had any interaction with her, or more likely, as I suspected, that he might, by virtue of his clients, have had interaction with those who've had some form of involvement with her. I know from his conversation that his clients are uber rich and money is no object for them. He talked a little about some of the latest projects that he'd been working on. Of course, he wasn't going to mention any of the names because he enters into confidentiality agreements with those that he works for. But what he did mention was that this one's wife and Harry are known to many of his clients that he's worked with in Monty Shit Show, and they are roundly disliked. Naturally, your glorious narrator regularly speaks about this one's wife and knows plenty about her. I feigned a degree of interest in her by explaining, yes, the runaway narcissist and her captive, referencing Prince Harry. My friend found that amusing and nodded, having reached a similar conclusion as to what this one's wife is. He explained that they are disliked in Monty Shit Show, not because they are necessarily seen that often, but because of the fact that they've caused a lot of drama in the area and brought a lot of attention to the area, which has effectively disrupted what is seen as a very private enclave. He said, they've disturbed everybody's retreat from Hollywood, that people have moved there seeking peace and quiet, that there'd been no drama, no involvement in the paparazzi, and unfortunately it has placed Monty Shit Show on the map as a consequence of this one's wife and the Prince of Pink Pancakes moving there, but moreover, their repeated need to court publicity. He explained that with his clients, they court their publicity elsewhere, and Monty Shit Show is in effect a sanctuary for them, away from the prying lens. But for this one's wife, she is the opposite, seeking to open it up to inclusion, to be seen, and that has really got up the nose of many of the residents there, including those of his clients. He explained that most recently he remodelled a house just a couple of houses away up the hill from them, and he was working for a particularly well-off female client and was involved in a meeting with them when he attended at the house, only to find that this one's wife and Harry were there. I asked him, interesting, had you met them before? He shook his head. Naturally, he explained, I formed a bit of a view about them as what I'd heard from my clients and what I'd read. I didn't take a huge amount of interest in them. But I then asked, well, what were they like? He explained that Harry was particularly friendly. He introduced himself simply as Harry, shook his hand, said hello, and then asked politely about what he was doing in terms of his attendance there, and he listened with a degree of interest as he explained about what he did in terms of his role. He said what it was interesting about this one's wife was that whilst she said hello and was all smiles initially, when it was Harry that was talking, he could see out of the corner of his eye that her expression had changed from one of being all smiley to one of irritation. It was as if she didn't like Harry being the one holding the conversation with him. He explained she kept trying to interject, making observations about interior design which he found rather laughable. He gained the clear impression that she was trying to pass herself off as some kind of expert in that regard, even though he knows, from what she was saying, that she knows very little about interior design. His overall impression was that Harry was a rather friendly chap and quite likeable. He said with her, initially she came across as friendly, but that soon melted away when she found that she wasn't getting the attention. After that, he had to leave. He wasn't sure what they were there for, but evidently they knew who this woman was. He again didn't tell me who it was, respecting confidentiality. But that was his brief encounter that took place with this one's wife and Harry, and I found it interesting to share this with you, because not only does it demonstrate how many people in Monty Shit Show view them as interlopers that are not liked, but even in that brief interaction, this one's wife's narcissism is demonstrative. Harry comes across as pleasant and friendly. She can't stand that Harry's holding court. I'm surprised she didn't try and hug my friend in order to detract from what Harry was saying, or cup his balls or such like. Also, it demonstrates how she believes she's an expert in so many things, talking about how she's an expert in interior design, and yet it was evident from what she was saying she clearly isn't, a little bit like the way that she behaves with regard to her cookery and crafting. I thought you would be interested to learn about that as a consequence of me coming across that piece of information following my recent travels. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.